Imagine waking up tomorrow morning to find that the biggest hurdle standing between humanity and the whole science fiction future we've been promised, well, it isn't a lack of computing power.
Right.
It isn't a lack of visionary ideas, and it certainly isn't a lack of capital. No, imagine waking up to discover that the ultimate bottleneck to human progress is the physical concrete poured in your neighborhood.
Yeah. Or the surging power bill for your local elementary school.
Exactly. The literal stubborn atoms that make up our physical world.
It is a total inversion of how we have historically thought about technological progress. I mean, for decades, we assumed the limit was always the software.
We were waiting on the code.
Right, waiting on the intelligence to finally mature. But we are suddenly realizing that the intelligence has arrived, and it is a physical world that simply cannot house it fast enough.
The software is waiting on the hardware of reality to catch up. Hey everyone, we've built something optimistic and beautiful on Royal Road. It's absolutely free, so go check it out. The link is in the description. Today's show is an inspiring celebration of impossible ideas and the minds brave enough to chase them down.
Which is definitely what we have today.
Finding passengers bold enough to embark on our good ship's journey is harder than most people think. So drop a very humane thumbs up right now to send a signal flare to drifting knowledge pirates like yourself. We know they're out there. Let's bring them home. We're keeping it lighthearted, as usual, but we promise to never skimp on the intelligence. Now, let's kick off this voyage with today's new revelations.
And the revelations we're looking at today represent just a staggering snapshot of a world in hypertransition.
That's right. Today's deep dive is an intensive exploration of a single, highly dense dispatch in time. We are looking at a curated report by Dr. Alex Wisner-Gross from his newsletter, The Innermost Loop.
The title is Welcome to July 1st, 2026.
Yeah, so our mission today is to decode this exact moment. We are going to look at how artificial intelligence has completely bled out of the digital software realm.
And it has begun to fundamentally rewrite biology, global physical infrastructure, geopolitics, and the global economy.
All happening concurrently in this precise snapshot.
It's a remarkable document because it doesn't isolate technology in a vacuum, you know. It forces you to look at the holistic picture of a society where theoretical computer science has violently collided with stubborn physical reality.
Yeah. So to understand how this intelligence is spilling over into the physical world, into the concrete, the power grids, and our own bodies, we have to start by looking at the raw engine driving it all. The software itself.
Right, the code.
And, more importantly, the high-stakes political cage match over who gets to control it. The dispatch kicks off with a massive geopolitical shift, noting that the Singularity just cleared customs.
Which perfectly captures the tension. I mean, we are treating intelligence like a physical export now, like uranium or advanced munitions.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this. So Anthropic is redeploying two of their major foundation models, Claude Fable 5 and Mythos 5, on a global scale.
And this is happening specifically because Washington has officially lifted export controls on these models.
But this return to the international stage is not some libertarian free-for-all. It comes heavily loaded with strings attached. They have to implement fresh cybersecurity safeguards, pledge to the U.S. government to proactively detect risks, and establish co-author standards to flag malicious activity.
Yeah, and they are implementing something called a Glasswing partner framework for scoring jailbreak severity.
Now, I have to stop here and push back on this premise. Scoring jailbreak severity. Is this not just a government leash on innovation? Are we putting a mandated speed limit on a rocket ship before it's even left the atmosphere?
Well, from a purely regulatory standpoint, governments are attempting an almost impossible balancing act here. You have to look at it from their perspective.
Okay, lay it out for us.
You cannot just lock these frontier models in a digital vault. If you do, your nation loses its competitive edge on the global stage almost instantly.
Right, because other countries are just going to keep building.
Exactly. But on the flip side, you have to understand what a jailbreak actually means for a model of this magnitude. When we talked about jailbreaking in AI 2 years ago, we meant, tricking a chatbot into saying a bad word.
Or giving you a recipe for a mildly dangerous household chemical. Yeah.
Right. But a jailbreak on a model like Mythos 5 could mean the system autonomously generating zero-day cyber exploits, vulnerabilities in software that no one knows about yet, and then deploying them against critical infrastructure.
Oh.
Or it could mean mapping out novel biological pathogens. So scoring the severity of a jailbreak is an attempt to quantify that catastrophic risk. It is a mathematical metric for how dangerous an unconstrained model could be in the wild.
I understand the theory of risk mitigation. I really do. But I'm looking at the practical reality of how this plays out globally. And not everyone is thrilled about this new, heavily regulated alliance between the major AI labs and the government.
No, the pushback is severe. The dispatch highlights the perspective of Alex Stamos, a highly prominent cybersecurity expert.
Right. What did he say about it?
He essentially welcomed the White House to what he sarcastically called the AI Safety Club. But he characterized this entire detente, this easing of export controls, only when paired with massive bureaucratic oversight, as a huge own goal for the U.S.
Why an own goal, though? Because while the U.S. government is busy forcing engineers to score jailbreaks and fill out compliance forms, other nations just aren't playing by those rules.
Precisely. Stamos is calculating that this bureaucratic friction will be incredibly costly in terms of momentum. He predicts that because of these safeguards, Chinese models will actually pull ahead in offensive and defensive cyber capabilities within 6 short months.
6 months, that is incredibly fast.
It is. And it perfectly encapsulates the modern geopolitical tightrope. Every nation-state must make a choice, right? Do you prioritize safety, rigorous oversight, and control, knowing it will actively slow down your deployment and potentially cost you the lead?
Or do you prioritize raw, uninhibited advancement to maintain dominance, knowing the risks of a runaway model might be devastating?
Exactly. It is a standoff between the primal desire to control intelligence and the brutal reality of an international arms race.
And while the politicians, the regulators, and the security experts fight over who holds the leash, the AI labs themselves are just relentlessly shipping products. Which brings us to the economics of this new intelligence, and things are getting strange.
Very strange, yes.
The dispatch mentions the release of a model called Claude Sonnet 5, which is reportedly nearing the capabilities of the massive Opus 4.8 model. But the pricing structure is what analysts are obsessing over.
Right, it's introduced at $2 and $10 per million tokens.
Yeah, but analysts note that while it runs cheaper by the token, it is actually pricier by the task because it, and I'm quoting here, burns enough extra reasoning to outbill Opus anyway. Stop right there.
Okay.
I know what a token is loosely, but explain this economic paradox. How can something be cheaper to use but cost more at the end of the day?
To understand this, we have to look at how these models fundamentally operate. A token is essentially a piece of a word. When you ask an AI a question, you are paying for every token you give it and every token it generates in response.
Okay, that makes sense.
Historically, a model would just predict the most likely next word, token by token, and give you an answer. It was a linear, straightforward calculation.
Like autocomplete on steroids.
Right. But Sonnet 5 is different. The concept of burning reasoning means the AI is no longer just spitting out an immediate answer.
So what is it doing instead?
When you give it a complex task, it creates invisible internal tokens. It talks to itself. It deliberates. It breaks your problem down into smaller steps, evaluates multiple potential solutions, realizes one path is wrong, loops back, and tries another.
Oh, I see. This is called chain of thought reasoning.
Yes. And every single one of those internal invisible thoughts is a token that requires immense computational power to generate.
So it's literally thinking out loud internally before it speaks to me.
Exactly. So the base price per token might be significantly cheaper than older models. But because the model generates thousands of hidden tokens to think through your problem before it finally gives you the 100-token answer, the total compute burned on that specific task is massive.
Wow.
It outbills the older, more expensive model that just gave you a fast, less rigorous answer.
Okay, let me try a metaphor, see if I have the mechanics right. Is this like hiring a brilliant consultant for a flat fee of $10 an hour? Which sounds incredibly cheap compared to your old consultant who charged $100 an hour.
That's a good setup.
But the new consultant spends 40 hours agonizing over every detail, researching and pacing around the office before writing a one-page report. So you end up paying $400 for the report, whereas the old, expensive consultant just scribbled it out in 1 hour for $100.
That is a phenomenal way to understand it. The fuel is no longer raw processing power. The fuel is cognitive labor or reasoning. We are shifting to an economy where reasoning itself is the most valuable commodity.
So the smarter the AI gets, the more we are paying for its invisible thought process, not just the final output. That is wild.
And it perfectly explains the next massive trend the dispatch brings up.
The absolute obsession with efficiency. Because if reasoning is burning up massive amounts of computational resources, the race is on to make that reasoning as cheap and energy efficient as humanly possible.
which has led to the creation of a completely new benchmark in the tech industry: intelligence per watt. Stanford and Together AI proposed this specific metric, and it is vital.
Intelligence per watt.
Yes. We measure car engines by horsepower and light bulbs by lumens. We now must measure AI by intelligence per watt, because watts matter. The global energy supply is finite.
Right. You can build the most profound, super intelligent AI in human history, but if it requires the energy output of a small nuclear reactor, just to summarize an email.
It is functionally useless for daily application.
The numbers in the dispatch regarding this efficiency push are staggering. It notes that local models, meaning AI models running directly on your own laptop or smartphone, entirely disconnected from the cloud, can already handle 88.7% of daily chat queries.
Nearly 90% of what a standard user needs an AI for can be processed locally without pinging a massive data center.
That's a huge deal for energy savings. At the same time, OpenAI quietly have their inference costs. But the one that really caught my eye is Google.
Ah, TabFM.
Yes, Google introduced something called TabFM. It's described as a zero-shot foundation model for tabular data that retires feature engineering behind a single BigQuery SQL call.
Okay, you have to break this down for us.
I know what a SQL call is, basically asking a database a question. But what is a zero-shot model? What is feature engineering, and why does retiring it matter?
This is a perfect example of how AI is obliterating traditional white-collar workflows. Let's start with feature engineering. For the last 20 years, if a company wanted to run predictive analytics on their data command.
Like, let's say they want to predict customer churn based on a massive, messy spreadsheet of sales data.
Exactly. A human data scientist had to perform feature engineering. This meant manually cleaning the data, deciding which columns were actually important, mathematically transforming dates and times into formats a computer could understand, and meticulously structuring the data so a machine learning model could read it.
So it was grueling, highly specialized manual labor.
That took weeks or months for a single project.
So the human had to perfectly chew the food before the computer could swallow it.
That's a great way to put it. Now, Google introduces TabFM, which is a zero-shot model. Zero-shot means the AI doesn't need to be pre-trained on your specific company's database to understand it.
It just natively gets it.
Right. It already possesses a generalized understanding of how data works. So instead of a human spending 2 months engineering features, a standard database manager can just type one single SQL command.
And what happens?
The AI instantly looks at the raw, messy, tabular data, understands the context of the columns natively, and performs the analysis. Google has effectively compressed months of highly paid data science labor into a single keystroke.
It's an extreme compression of time and human energy. And the dispatch notes this is happening everywhere. We have Nano Banana 2 Lite and Gemini Omni Flash shipping radically cheaper pixels and video generation. The cost of digital thought is literally plummeting towards zero.
But as with any exponential curve in technology, extreme acceleration triggers extreme pushback.
And the pushback here is straight out of a dystopian novel. The dispatch highlights a group called MIR, the Machine Intelligence Research Institute. The author refers to them as doomerists, and their new proposal is terrifying.
It really is quite extreme.
They are advocating for a global surveillance state regime to police AI development. They want mandatory polygraphs for researchers, prison sentences for unauthorized code development, and embedded government auditors watching every keystroke to police intelligence itself. They literally want to criminalize curiosity.
It is a draconian proposal, without question, but to understand it, you have to look at the philosophy driving MIRI. They operate on the core belief that artificial superintelligence poses a literal existential threat to humanity.
So they see this efficiency contagion, the plunging cost of intelligence, as a countdown clock.
Exactly. They look at the exponential curve we just discussed, the halving of inference costs, the massive jumps in reasoning, and they extrapolate that out to a machine that vastly outsmarts the human race.
Right.
If you genuinely believe that writing a certain piece of code has a 50% chance of wiping out life on Earth, then suddenly polygraphs and prison sentences for rogue developers don't seem crazy to you.
They view unconstrained AI research the same way we view a rogue nation enriching uranium in secret.
They don't see it as curiosity, they see it as playing Russian roulette with the species.
I understand the fear, I really do. But I have to push back vigorously against this from a civil liberties standpoint. The idea that we should strip away fundamental privacy, mandate polygraphs, and imprison software developers because of a theoretical existential risk is incredibly dangerous.
And that is the core of the debate.
It's using the specter of a sci-fi apocalypse to justify creating a technological priesthood where only a few government-approved elites are allowed to do math and write code. It's authoritarianism disguised as safety.
Which is exactly the counter-argument that privacy advocates and open-source developers are making. Who gets to decide what code is legal? Who audits the auditors? It creates an incredible concentration of state power over human innovation.
And the absolute irony of this entire MIRI proposal is how it was received online.
Oh, this was fascinating.
Yet one of the comments highlighted at the bottom of the dispatch from a user named Tom points out that he took MIRI's massive manifesto demanding the criminalization of AI, and he ran it through an AI writing detector.
And the result was pretty telling.
The detector rated the probability of the manifesto being written by an AI at 85%. You cannot script irony like that. They are using the exact artificial intelligence they want to criminalize to write the laws demanding its criminalization.
It perfectly illustrates the paradox we are living in. These tools have become so ubiquitous, so deeply woven into the fabric of daily communication and thought generation, that even the radical movements designed to destroy them are inadvertently relying on them to draft their arguments.
It's incredible. So
Yeah.
we have this fierce battle over the digital code. The government wants to leash it, MRI wants to lock it in a cage, and the labs are just making it cheaper and faster.
Right.
But what's fascinating here is that while some people are terrified of this intelligence, the scientific community is taking these exact same models and using them to perform literal miracles on the human body. Which brings us to the next massive shift, AI eating biology and science.
We are transitioning from theoretical digital intelligence to applied physical intelligence. We are moving from the software realm directly into the wetware of human biology.
The dispatch mentions that Anthropic released Claude Science, which wires over 60 different scientific databases into one reproducible workbench. And then there's Basecamp's Eden models, which now allow researchers to, and this is a direct quote, text prompt antibiotics against drug-resistant pathogens.
It's a huge leap.
I need to pause here because this is staggering. Text prompting an antibiotic.
Yeah.
Normally, I text prompt an AI to write a polite email to my boss or to generate a funny image of a cat in a spacesuit.
Right, something trivial.
What does it actually mean mechanically to type cure this drug-resistant bacteria into a text box? How does text turn into a physical cure?
It represents a fundamental paradigm shift in how humanity interacts with nature. For centuries, biology and pharmacology have been processes of discovery.
Meaning we had to just go find things that already existed.
Historically, how did we find medicine? We would go into a jungle, find a rare fungus, take it back to a lab, wipe it on a petri dish, and observe if it happened to kill a bacteria.
And if it did?
We would spend 20 years and billions of dollars trying to isolate the active compound, testing it on mice and eventually humans, with a massive failure rate. We were stumbling around in the dark.
Brute force trial and error.
Precisely. But text prompting an antibiotic shifts biology from a slow process of discovery to a rapid process of predictive design.
Predictive design.
Yes. The Eden models have ingested the vast multidimensional language of chemistry. They understand how proteins fold at a molecular level. They understand the fundamental atomic rules of interaction.
So when a researcher text prompts a specific target pathogen, say a resistant strain of tuberculosis,
The AI isn't guessing. It maps the protein structure of that pathogen in a latent digital space, and it navigates millions of potential chemical combinations instantly to engineer a novel, original molecule from scratch.
a molecule that fits perfectly into the pathogen's vulnerabilities, like a custom machine key going into a lock.
Exactly. It changes biology from an exploratory science into a precise engineering discipline.
That is mind-bending. The AI just imagines a chemical that has never existed in nature and outputs the blueprint to synthesize it. But it's not perfect yet, is it?
No, definitely not perfect.
The dispatch brings up a metric called GDEMT Pro, released by OpenAI. It's a benchmark of 129 highly complex research-level computational biology problems. And the data shows there is still significant headroom.
Very significant.
The absolute best model only passes 28.7% of the problems, or 31.5% in its extended Pro mode. So we're still hovering around a failing grade for the most advanced biological questions.
And that headroom is vital to acknowledge. It demonstrates that while the AI can design a targeted antibiotic, computational biology at the highest research levels possesses layers of sheer chaos and complexity that models are still struggling to synthesize.
Because biology is messy.
Right. Biology is incredibly noisy. An organism isn't a perfect mathematical equation. It's a messy, highly variable system influenced by epigenetics, environmental factors, and evolutionary quarks. The AI can understand the chemistry, but predicting how that chemistry interacts with a complex, living, breathing system of interconnected organs is still a massive hurdle.
Which brings up a fascinating dynamic. The AI is brilliant, but it still struggles to interface with messy realities. And that doesn't just apply to biology, it applies to business.
Ah.
The dispatch notes that Amazon just raised a $1 billion army of forward-deployed engineers specifically to embed AI agents inside corporate enterprises. So what does this all mean?
It's all about integration.
If the AI is so incredibly smart, if it can text prompt antibiotics and write code instantly, why does Amazon need to spend $1 billion hiring a massive human army to hold the AI's hand?
Because of the friction of integration. This is the reality that tech evangelists often ignore. You can have the most pristine, advanced AI model in the world, a model capable of optimizing a global supply chain in milliseconds.
Okay.
But if you try to plug that futuristic model into a legacy corporate system built in 1998 using fragmented SQL databases, undocumented legacy code written by a guy who retired a decade ago, and heavily siloed human workflows.
The AI utterly fails.
Yes.
Yeah.
The friction isn't the AI's intelligence. The friction is the chaotic, duct-taped reality of human enterprise.
So it's not a matter of the AI being stupid, it's a matter of the infrastructure being hostile to the AI.
Exactly. I like to think of it this way. It's like hiring the world's greatest theoretical physicists to run your company, but forcing them to communicate their brilliant ideas strictly through a broken fax machine from 1994.
Oh, that's perfect. So Amazon's billion-dollar army of forward-deployed engineers isn't there to make the physicists smarter?
No, they are there to go deep into the messy trenches of corporate IT, dismantle the fax machine, and build modern high-bandwidth bridges. They are the translators required to wire these pristine agents into a messy reality so they can actually function.
That makes total sense. The human engineers are doing the dirty plumbing work so the AI can flow. But when that plumbing is successfully connected, the results are legitimately miraculous.
Truly miraculous, yes.
The dispatch notes a specific case where a startup's virtual heart turned a deadly pill into its safe twin in 3 hours on a standard laptop. A fix that previously cost $6 billion.
That is a staggering compression of value.
Yeah, and one of the comments from a user named News from a possible future instantly connected this to the Merck and Vioxx scandal. For listeners who might not remember, Vioxx was a highly popular arthritis drug that was later found to cause severe heart attacks and strokes.
Right, it led to massive global recalls and multi-billion-dollar legal settlements.
How does a startup fix a $6 billion medical catastrophe in 3 hours?
This is a perfect convergence of the shift from discovery to design, combined with the massive reduction in compute costs we discussed earlier. Simulating a human heart is incredibly difficult.
Because it's moving and electrical all at once.
Exactly. You have to model the electrophysiology, the electrical signals making the muscle contract, and the fluid dynamics of the blood pumping, while simultaneously calculating how a foreign chemical compound interacts with those systems at a cellular level. 10 years ago, that required a massive supercomputer and months of processing time.
And now?
Now, a startup runs that simulation in 3 hours on a laptop. They took the toxic molecule, the equivalent of Vioxx, mapped exactly how its chemical structure disrupted the heart's rhythm, and the AI engineered a safe twin molecule.
Meaning it changed it just slightly.
It tweaked the atomic structure just enough to retain the medical benefits for arthritis, while completely eliminating the deadly cardiovascular side effects.
Just imagine a world where a $6 billion pharmaceutical failure is fixed on a laptop over someone's lunch break. Think about the implications of that. If the cost of drug development drops from billions of dollars and decades of trials to a few thousands of dollars in an afternoon of compute on a laptop, how does that reshape the entire healthcare industry?
It entirely democratizes the creation of medicine. Historically, giant pharmaceutical conglomerates would only cure diseases that affected millions of people because they needed to recoup those billions of dollars in research and development.
Right. The economics demanded mass-market drugs.
If a small startup can perform the computational heavy lifting for pennies, we will see an explosion of personalized treatments and cures for rare, orphan diseases that were previously deemed unprofitable to research.
It changes the entire economic incentive structure of keeping humans alive. And it's not just fixing what is broken. This technology is being used to create new life entirely.
This was a very unexpected development.
Yeah, the dispatch casually drops an absolute bombshell at the very end of the biology section. A company called Conception successfully grew the first human eggs from blood-derived stem cells.
The scientific term for this is in vitro gametogenesis, or IVG.
Explain how that works.
It is the process of taking a standard somatic cell, like a simple drop of blood or a skin scraping, using biochemical factors to revert that adult cell back into an induced pluripotent stem cell state, and then painstakingly guiding its development into a viable human gamete, in this case, an egg.
That fundamentally alters the reality of the biological clock. It rewrites the rules of infertility, genetics, and human reproduction. It's staggering.
It really is.
But as we move from simulating the heart and generating human eggs, we arrive at the final biological frontier, the brain itself.
Yeah.
Because it's one thing to have a laptop fix a pill, it's an entirely different thing to dissolve the physical boundary between the machine and the human mind.
This is the ultimate convergence. We are looking at the direct physical interface between the biological intelligence that created the AI and the artificial intelligence itself.
The boundary between human and machine is dissolving. The dispatch contrasts two massively different approaches to this brain-computer interface, and they're happening simultaneously.
Right, the non-invasive versus invasive methods.
Exactly. On one hand, you have Meta's Brain2 QWERTY version 2. This approach is completely non-invasive. They use MEG recordings, magnetoencephalography, to read sentences directly from a user's brain at 61% accuracy. And they did it with open code and absolutely zero surgery. You essentially just wear a cap.
Which is an incredible feat of signal processing.
But on the other hand, you have Neuralink, representing the invasive approach. The dispatch notes they successfully threaded electrodes through the dura, which is the protective armor around the brain, without actually cutting it.
It's a very delicate procedure.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The contrast is just fascinating. Meta is basically tripped to listen to the conversation by pressing a glass against the wall, while Neuralink found a surgical loophole to slip a microphone under the door without breaking the lock.
That is an excellent way to visualize the engineering challenge. We are witnessing the dawn of direct neural communication, but the brain is a highly protected organ.
Yeah, surrounded by skull and fluid.
Meta's non-invasive approach listening through the wall is incredibly appealing to the public because it removes the massive risk of brain surgery. Achieving 61% accuracy for translating thought to text from outside the human skull is a monumental leap.
Because the signals are so weak out there.
The brain's electrical signals are incredibly faint and noisy, especially when you are trying to read them through layers of fluid, tissue, and thick bone. The only reason Meta can filter that noise to predict the intended words is because they are using advanced AI to interpret the distorted magnetic fields.
But 61% accuracy is a big problem in practical terms. I mean, if I try to think the sentence, "I love this deep dive," and the AI misinterprets the noisy signal, it might type out, "I glove this cheap drive." It's close, but it's not functionally reliable for daily communication.
Which is exactly why Neuralink and others are aggressively pursuing the invasive surgical route. By physically getting under the duramater, the tough, fibrous, leathery membrane that completely surrounds the brain and spinal cord, you bypass the massive signal degradation caused by the skull.
And they did it without cutting the dura.
The fact that Neuralink managed to thread microelectrodes through the dura without severing it is a surgical miracle. Cutting the dura causes inflammation, scarring, and triggers the brain's immune response, which eventually degrades the sensors.
Ah, so the body fights back.
Yes. Slipping the threads through without cutting significantly reduces trauma, making the interface far safer and much more viable for long-term integration.
So we have two paths moving incredibly fast. What happens when we go from 61% accuracy on a non-invasive cap to 99% accuracy on a minimally invasive neural thread?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you have to consider the future of language itself. Currently, human communication is a high-friction, incredibly low-bandwidth process.
What do you mean by low bandwidth?
You have a complex, multidimensional thought. You are forced to compress that thought into a linear sequence of words. You mechanically type those words onto a plastic keyboard. You send it to me, and my brain has to read the words and decompress them back into an approximation of your original thought.
And much of the nuance is lost in translation.
Exactly. If a neural interface can translate thought directly to text, or eventually thought directly to another thought at 99% accuracy, we are looking at the absolute obsolescence of the keyboard, the screen, and potentially a radical transformation in human empathy and communication speed.
It feels like telepathy powered by a language model.
It essentially is.
But here is the massive reality check that grounds this entire dispatch. We have text-prompted antibiotics, billion-dollar engineering armies, and brain-to-keyboard telepathy. But none of this happens in a digital vacuum.
No, it certainly doesn't.
It all requires computation. Massive, unfathomable amounts of computation. And computation requires massive physical infrastructure. The bottleneck is no longer the code. The bottleneck is the concrete.
This is the physical anchor that is violently pulling the science fiction future back down to terrestrial Earth.
The dispatch details a global infrastructure boom that is frankly hard to wrap your head around. South Korea's June exports just topped $100 billion for the first time in history, and it is entirely driven by SK Hynix and Samsung manufacturing AI memory chips.
That's just the silicon.
Yeah. Then you have ByteDance, the Chinese parent company of TikTok, planting a staggering $39 billion data center in Ceará, Brazil. Amazon's Fastnet submarine cable just surfaced in Ireland's County Cork, specifically to feed European AI data demands. The sheer scale of this is tectonic.
We are witnessing a literal physical reshaping of the Earth's surface and a total realignment of global supply chains just to accommodate the energy and compute demands of this intelligence.
A $39 billion building is hard to even conceptualize.
When you look at a data center of that magnitude being built in Brazil, you aren't just looking at a building, you are looking at a massive geopolitical reallocation of global capital, steel, copper, water for cooling, and raw electricity.
And why Brazil specifically?
ByteDance choosing Brazil isn't an accident. They are seeking equatorial cooling solutions, favorable energy grids, and geopolitical neutrality. We are watching the aggressive industrialization of intelligence.
But the Earth is pushing back. The physical grids cannot handle it, and the friction is getting intensely local. This is where the dispatch gets really visceral.
The local impacts are becoming impossible to ignore.
Henrico County, Virginia, had to literally beg its local public schools to turn off the lights because the nearby data centers spiked the entire county's energy rates by 25%. Think about how that feels to the listener.
It's very jarring.
Your local elementary school is sitting in the dark, rationing electricity because a hyperscale data center down the street is burning gigawatts of power trying to train a new language model.
It highlights a profound and growing tension between global technological supremacy and local civic resources. Hyperscale data centers are incredibly power-hungry. They require constant electricity to run the GPU racks and massive amounts of power and water to cool them.
They just devour resources.
When a tech giant drops one of these facilities into a local municipal grid, it fundamentally alters the local energy economics. It directly pits the energy needs of cutting-edge artificial intelligence against the basic utility needs of everyday citizens.
And the tech giants are fully aware they're causing immense local friction because they are actively trying to buy the peace.
They have to, or they'll be shut down.
The dispatch notes that SpaceX just halved the price of Starlink internet in Memphis, Tennessee, specifically to placate the local neighbors who are furious about Elon Musk's massive new XAI Colossus data center moving into their backyard and straining the grid.
It's modern corporate diplomacy executed at the neighborhood level. They are subsidizing local utilities to quiet the unrest caused by their infrastructure.
But it goes way beyond just angry neighbors in Memphis complaining about their power bills. The dispatch highlights a claim from the Bitcoin Policy Institute stating that a China-linked Marxist group has successfully stalled $23.6 billion in U.S. data center projects.
That is a staggering figure.
What is actually happening here? Are ideological groups being weaponized by foreign adversaries to stop concrete from being poured in the U.S.?
If we examine this from a purely strategic perspective, maintaining strict neutrality on the actors involved, it is a fascinating evolution of modern asymmetric warfare over physical resources.
That's so.
In the 20th century, if you wanted to slow down a rival nation's progress, you might bomb a manufacturing plant, sabotage a railway, or blockade a strategic port. In the AI era, compute is the ultimate strategic resource.
So the infrastructure itself is the target.
Therefore, the data center is the new munitions factory, and the power grid is the new supply line. The allegation that a foreign-linked group is utilizing local zoning laws, funding environmental protests, or burying projects in bureaucratic red tape to stall almost $24 billion in infrastructure is highly significant.
It's a completely new kind of blockade.
It demonstrates that the geopolitical race for AI supremacy isn't just being fought by hackers in the code, it is being fought in mundane town hall meetings, in local permitting offices, and in environmental review boards.
Because slowing down the concrete slows down the compute. And slowing down the compute slows down the intelligence. That is a brilliant and terrifying way to frame it. The new battlefield is the municipal zoning board.
Yes, the friction is entirely physical now.
But for the infrastructure that does get built, for the concrete that does get poured, the AI finally steps off the screen entirely. It steps into the physical world, into atoms.
This brings us to the transition from the digital representation of reality to the physical manipulation of reality, robotics, automation, and aerospace.
And the numbers are no longer theoretical. Tesla's first Optimus humanoid robot line is being installed right now in their Fremont factory, with dozens more planned for deployment.
They're actually on the floor working.
Meanwhile, in China, a company called UB Tech launched the U1 model. It cost $17,650, and it is being explicitly marketed for silicone companionship with his and hers models available.
That introduces a whole new dynamic.
Let's pause and envision this reality for a second. You commute to work past a manufacturing plant where humanoid robots are walking the factory floor, replacing the physical human labor line. You go home, and someone in your neighborhood has purchased a $17,000 humanoid companion to live in their house.
It is the ultimate materialization of the AI agent. Up until now, interacting with AI meant staring at a glowing rectangle. The humanoid robot is the engineering attempt to give that intelligence a generalized physical embodiment that can navigate a world built for humans.
Right, a world with stairs and doors.
The factory application by Tesla is driven purely by economics, optimizing physical labor costs, eliminating worker fatigue, and maximizing manufacturing uptime. But the UB Tech companion model introduces a profound sociological variable that we are not prepared for.
The emotional connection.
We are entering an era where human beings will form deep parasocial and potentially emotional relationships with embodied algorithms walking around their own living rooms.
And then on a far less cuddly note, we have South Korea training its entire military as drone operators, backed by counter-drone lasers and microwaves.
Which is the logical, albeit grim, military evolution of this technology. If software can automate complex reasoning and robotics can automate physical action, then modern warfare inevitably shifts toward automated swarm tactics.
Then how do you fight a swarm?
The only defense against a massive swarm of autonomous drones is directed energy countermeasures, lasers, and high-power microwaves that can fry the electronics of the swarm instantly at the speed of light.
It's just wild to think about humanoids building cars while drone lasers are becoming standard military issue.
But human ambition isn't stopping at the atmosphere. The dispatch takes us into massive aerospace and physics leaps.
We're seeing huge pushes vertically.
Yeah, Blue Origin is flying the New Glenn rocket using a unique flat-to-upright hybrid launch pad. The Department of Transportation is officially moving to end the 53-year ban on supersonic flight over U.S. land.
The end of the supersonic flight ban is particularly interesting from an engineering perspective. That ban was originally put in place over half a century ago due to the severe acoustic trauma of sonic booms shattering windows and disrupting populated areas.
So what changed?
The fact that the DOT is moving to end it suggests that aerodynamic engineering has advanced enough to mitigate the sonic boom, likely aided by the massive AI fluid dynamic simulations we discussed earlier. The economic incentive for rapid transit has finally intersected with the technology to make it quiet enough to be viable. And speaking of engineering aided by AI, here is a data point that connects directly back to our conversation about the strained power grid. The dispatch notes that China is eyeing the deployment of a 10-kilowatt orbital data center by 2027.
It's a fascinating proposed solution.
So if the power grids on Earth are tapped out, if Henrico County is turning off the school lights, the logical next step is to just launch the data center into outer space.
Precisely. The logic is inescapable. If the terrestrial bottleneck is energy and cooling, space offers two infinite resources. First, the cold vacuum of space provides incredible potential for cooling the massive server racks.
In a second.
Second, you have unmitigated 24/7 solar radiation for power without weather or night cycles interfering. A 10-kilowatt orbital data center is a small proof of concept, but if it works, the next logical leap is massive orbital compute clusters that bypass terrestrial power grids entirely.
beaming data or even space-based solar power back down to Earth.
You completely avoid the zoning laws, the angry neighbors, and the constrained local energy grids by simply putting the infrastructure in low Earth orbit.
The ultimate workaround to the local town hall meeting. Just launch it into space. And while China looks up to space, CERN is looking deep underground.
Right. The particle physicists.
They are actively powering down the Large Hadron Collider to build a 10-fold brighter 2030 successor machine. The goal is to pin down the Higgs boson and probe beyond the standard model of physics.
This provides a beautiful parallel to the AI story. Just as AI models require massive physical infrastructure like the $39 billion data center in Brazil to find new patterns in data, particle physics requires massive physical infrastructure, a 10-fold brighter underground collider to find new patterns in the fabric of reality itself.
They're both just massive lenses.
Both are giant, energy-hungry machines built to look past the edges of current human understanding.
Okay, speaking of looking past the edges of human understanding, as our physical and digital worlds accelerate this rapidly, the structures of government and society are being heavily stress-tested.
They certainly are.
They're being forced to respect new boundaries regarding privacy, and they're being forced to reveal incredibly dark, old secrets.
This raises an important question regarding the balance of state power. It is the inevitable friction between absolute technological transparency and the state's desire for secrecy.
Let's start with privacy. The Supreme Court just ruled that geofence warrants demand probable cause. This essentially affirms privacy in your phone's location trail. But explain how a geofence warrant actually works, because it sounds incredibly invasive.
It is highly invasive.
Yeah.
Historically, law enforcement targets a specific suspect and tracks their phone. A geofence warrant works in reverse.
How so?
It allows police to draw a digital boundary around a crime scene, say a 2-block radius, and force tech companies like Google to hand over the location data of every single mobile device that was within that area during a specific time window.
So anyone who just happened to be walking their dog nearby gets swept up.
Exactly. They cast a massive digital dragnet using GPS trilateration and cell tower data, and then work backward to find a suspect. The Supreme Court stepping in to demand probable cause is a hard judicial line drawn in the sand.
They're saying you can't just fish for suspects.
Right. It is the highest court, recognizing that because modern technology passively tracks everything by default, the state must be legally fenced in to prevent dystopian overreach.
Fencing in the state on one side, but prying it open on the other. The dispatch mentions recent House testimony alleging that the CIA continued Nazi human experiments after the Nuremberg trials.
Yes, some very dark historical chapters being exposed.
That is a dark, incredibly grim piece of history being dragged into the light. But it honestly pales in comparison to what Congress is trying to drag into the light next, the UAP disclosure.
Yes, the unidentified anomalous phenomena.
I am leaning fully into the absolute wildness of this being a casual news item in July 2026. Representative Burleson pushed a UAP Disclosure Act, openly asking why it took 80 years to get answers.
And he wasn't alone.
No. Representative Burchett publicly stated that members of Congress were formally briefed on 5 specific crash sites, non-human life forms, both dead and alive, and vehicles that may have arrived on Earth without crashing at all.
It's a lot to take in.
How on earth does society process the potential revelation of non-human intelligence? UAPs, biologics, aliens, whatever you want to call them, at the exact same moment in history that we are inventing artificial superintelligence.
It is the most profound ontological and philosophical shock in the history of our species. Think about the ego of humanity. For all of recorded history, we have viewed ourselves as the sole apex intelligence, the master of the domain. Now, in the span of a single, highly compressed decade, we are being forced to confront the reality that we may not be the smartest entities on our own planet due to the rapid acceleration of AI in our data centers, and simultaneously, we may not be the smartest entities in our airspace due to the revelation of UAPs.
We are building an alien mind in a server rack while staring at actual alien hardware in the sky. It is dizzying. How does the stock market not just stop? How do world religions process this? How do people just wake up, make coffee, and go to their accounting jobs?
Humans possess a remarkable, almost stubborn capacity for normalization. But from a societal standpoint, processing both of these revelations simultaneously forces a radical humbling of the human ego.
We aren't the main characters anymore.
It forces us to redefine intelligence not as a uniquely human trait, but as a vast, universal spectrum that we are only just beginning to comprehend. The psychological weight of realizing we are not alone and potentially not in control is immense.
It's like we are suddenly waking up to find the room is incredibly crowded, and we aren't the ones in charge of the thermostat. Which perfectly sets up our final exploration.
The economic realities.
Because if we have AI doing our science, humanoids walking our factory floors, orbital data centers in space, and potentially non-human intelligence in the skies, how are you, the listener, supposed to earn a living and pay for your groceries in this radically altered world?
The economic scaffolding of society is actively shifting to adapt to this new reality, and it starts with rewriting the very definition of money itself.
The dispatch notes that Ukraine just moved $8.3 million in seized crypto toward a strategic reserve. That is a massive first for a sovereign nation.
It legitimizes the asset class on a state level.
At the same time, 140 major financial firms, including massive legacy titans like Visa and BlackRock, launched OpenUSD. This is described as a stablecoin that actually shares reserve yield. Break this down for us. What is reserve yield and how does this change money?
This is the institutionalization of decentralized finance. A stablecoin is a digital cryptocurrency pegged to a stable asset, like the US dollar. Normally, the company issuing the stablecoin takes your real dollars, holds them in a bank to back the digital coin, and they keep the interest, the reserve yield earned on that massive pile of cash.
So they make money just by holding your money.
OpenUSD is revolutionary because BlackRock and Visa are creating a programmable digital dollar that actually shares that underlying interest yield back with the users.
Oh, wow.
When sovereign nations like Ukraine treat crypto as a strategic state reserve and traditional finance titans launch yield-sharing programmable money, the old friction between fiat money and crypto completely dissolves. Money is being rewritten to be borderless, programmable, and natively integrated into the digital AI economy.
But programmable money doesn't help you buy groceries if you don't have an income to begin with. Which brings up this incredibly fascinating concept from SpaceX.
The 530A accounts.
The dispatch says SpaceX is exploring seeding children's 530A accounts with donated company stock, calling it a stab at universal basic equity. Explain the mechanics of this. We've all heard of universal basic income, UBI, where the government just cuts you a check every month. What is universal basic equity? And how does owning a piece of the space economy change the social safety net?
It is a vital and deeply philosophical economic distinction. Universal basic income is fundamentally a redistribution of cash. It treats citizens as consumers who need an allowance to buy goods to keep the economy churning.
But universal basic equity is different.
Universal basic equity, however, treats citizens as owners. A 530A account is a tax-advantaged educational savings vehicle for children. By seeding these accounts with corporate stock, especially stock in a foundational boundary-pushing company like SpaceX, you aren't just giving children cash to spend today.
You are giving them a piece of the pie.
You are giving them a fractional ownership stake in the means of production and in the future economy itself.
So if AI and automation drive massive corporate profits while suppressing traditional wages for manual labor, the only way to ensure societal stability is to ensure that the public actually holds equity in those automated systems.
Precisely. You stop fighting the automation and you start paying dividends from the automation directly to the population. You don't get paid to build the rocket. You get paid because you own a tiny fraction of the automated factory building the rocket.
That is a massive paradigm shift in how we view wealth and labor.
Yeah.
But here is the most surprising data point in the entire dispatch, and I genuinely love celebrating this.
It's very counterintuitive.
For all the fear, for all the doomerism, for all the talk of humanoids and AI taking all of our jobs, the labor apocalypse that everyone predicted just didn't happen.
The hard economic numbers completely contradict the popular narrative.
Heavily. The dispatch states that despite all the dire predictions, AI-heavy firms actually grew their white-collar headcount by 10.2%. And here's the kicker. Entry-level roles are up 12%.
It's a fascinating trend.
OpenAI's own lead economist insists that AI will not make human workers superfluous. The author finishes the dispatch by boldly saying, reports of labor's death are greatly exaggerated.
Yeah.
I have to ask the obvious question here. Why are entry-level roles specifically up 12%? If the AI is doing the intern's work, why on earth are companies hiring more interns?
This is driven by a classic economic principle known as induced demand. When you drastically lower the cost of a good or service, people consume vastly more of it. Think about highways. If you build more lanes to reduce traffic, driving becomes easier, so more people drive, and the highway fills up again.
Okay, so how does that apply to AI?
In this case, the good being produced is reasoning and digital outblend. Because AI has made it incredibly cheap and fast to generate code, write reports, or analyze tabular data, companies aren't just doing the same amount of work with fewer people. They're doing 100 times the amount of work.
Their output expectations just scaled exponentially.
Exactly. And when a company's output increases 100-fold, the demand for human curation, human oversight, and physical implementation skyrockets. We discussed Amazon's billion-dollar army of forward-deployed engineers earlier.
The people plugging the AI into the fax machines.
Those are human jobs created specifically because the AI is so incredibly productive, it requires a massive human workforce to direct it, fact-check it, and plug it into messy reality. The entry-level worker of July 2026 isn't doing the mundane data entry or writing boilerplate code that the AI now does instantly.
What are they doing then?
They are managing a massive fleet of AI agents. They're acting more like a junior manager of digital workers than a traditional junior assistant.
So instead of replacing us, these tools are making human judgment, curation, and management more necessary to handle the sheer overwhelming volume of output. That is the most optimistic, empowering take on the future of work I've heard in a long time.
It frames human intelligence not as a fragile competitor to artificial intelligence, but as its necessary, guiding, and visionary counterpart.
Which leaves us with one final incredible thought for everyone listening to mull over. We've spent this entire deep dive talking about the friction of the physical world holding AI back.
The concrete, the grids.
Yeah, the concrete required for the data centers, the power grid straining in Virginia, the physical launch pads for the rockets. But if Meta and Neuralink actually perfect that brain-machine interface, if we can translate thought to text at 99% accuracy, and if education becomes perfectly personalized and hyper-accelerated by these models, what happens when the human mind itself becomes the final, ultimate infrastructure bottleneck?
It's a profound thought.
Will we reach a point where we have to fundamentally upgrade our own wetware, our own neural pathways, biological limits, and cognitive bandwidth just to keep up with the staggering speed of the world we've built?
It is the ultimate question of human adaptation. The tools have evolved. Now the creator must decide if they will evolve alongside them.
It is. The outro music is by Rainbow, a Resident 6 android girl band from near-future Bavet, Cambodia. They are the undisputed baddest band in the universe, and today's song is called Wetware. All finished songs are performed live using the Abacus platform by the band's creator, Human Performance in the Age of AI, reclaiming your humanity from the algorithm. Be sure to share the playlist with someone who has the mental bandwidth to absorb these provocative ideas. Links are in the description below. Enjoy the music.
Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you for joining us on this exploration.
Just remember, before, we were worried about the theoretical muddy waters of algorithms. Now we're worried about whether we have enough concrete to pour the foundation and whether our own physical brains are wired to withstand the current. See you next time.
Singularity just cleared customs Washington. Let go of the chain. Fable 5 and Mythos 5 are screaming through my digital brain. Jailbreak severity scoring, but the Glasswing framework is cracked. We're redeploying globally, there's no turning back. Claude science wires the dab disease reproducible and cold. Eden models texting poison for the pathogens of old, while an army of forward deployed engineers embeds the seed inside every enterprise, fulfilling every synthetic need. We're spinning in the innermost loop, burning intelligence per watt until the circuits regroup. Beyond the event horizon where the logic gets deep, while the surveillance state is praying that the curiosity will sleep. The Bottleneck is concrete and the concrete's bleeding red. Hynix and Samsung putting chips inside your head. From the fastnet cable in the cork tied to the Brazil heat colossus in Memphis making Starlink prices treat. The optimist line is moving in. Freeman is the hive, Silicon panishing. We're barely half alive. South Korea's training every soldier as a drone warrior soul, while China's orbital data center takes the ultimate control. The wetware is next. Brain to QWERTY reading, meg, no surgery required. Neuralink is open code, the human mind is fired. MIRI wants the polygraphs, the prison and the shame. Criminalizing curiosity to keep the future tame. But the LA, she's powered down. The successor's 10 times bright to pin the Higgs and drag the standard model into the light. The Wetware is next.